Welcome to the debate. Usually, when we talk about the so-called year of the Linux desktop, it operates like a running industry joke among developers. It's a bit like, waiting for a ghost ship. You stare out at the horizon, somebody swears they see the sails cutting through the fog, but the ship...
The ship never actually arrives in the harbor.
Right, exactly. We just keep writing code in our terminals, managing our window managers, and telling ourselves that next year, the massive commercial software giants will finally treat Linux as a primary target.
Yeah, it's an illusion we've collectively agreed to maintain, I think. We deeply value the idea of Linux as a premier independent desktop environment, but, well, historically, the commercial software industry just treats it strictly as an afterthought.
Right.
You get the server binaries, you get the headless command line tools for your infrastructure, and you are left entirely to fend for yourself when it comes to a polished, unified graphical interface.
But then you look at what happened on August 11th, 2026. OpenAI officially drops a native ChatGPT desktop application for Linux. And suddenly, that ship isn't just in the harbor, it is aggressively offloading cargo.
Oh, absolutely.
So today, we are examining the preview release of this ChatGPT desktop app for Linux. This release brings ChatGPT, the enterprise-focused ChatGPT work, and the Codex programming agent directly to the open-source ecosystem in a single graphical user interface. And critically, it arrives just weeks after the Windows and Mac versions and roughly a month after Anthropic launched its own Claude Linux beta.
Or, to stick with your maritime metaphor, the ship has arrived, but half the cargo crates are completely empty.
And that, right there, is the crux of our discourse today. Our central question is this: is this unified graphical desktop application a strategic milestone that fundamentally elevates the Linux developer workflow? Or is it, as you suggest, a rushed, incomplete user interface that fails to deliver true agentic capabilities compared to the command line tools we already rely on?
Right.
I take the position that this release is a vital visual coordination layer. It signals Linux's new status as a primary AI battleground, ending the era of Linux as a second-class citizen in commercial software development.
And I take the position that this application offers an illusion of true desktop integration. I see it as a compromise preview, one that severely lacks the essential desktop automation required to justify, pulling a Linux power user out of their terminal environment.
Okay, so let's lay out our structural arguments. To me, the significance of this release just cannot be overstated. We are looking at a native, unified client that handles standard generative chat, complex enterprise workflows via ChatGPT work, and the Codex programming agent all in one place.
Sure, but...
And OpenAI didn't just throw a generic, hastily compiled package over the wall. They delivered official support across major distributions. We're talking Ubuntu 24.04 and 26.04, Debian 13, Fedora 43 and 44, packaging it cleanly in both .deb and .rpm formats.
Right, the packaging is standard.
But more importantly, they shipped with both x64 and ARM64 architecture support from day one. That is a staggering engineering commitment to the platform.
It's a commitment, yeah.
I argue that even in this preview state, this GUI provides an essential coordination layer. When you are dealing with complex, long-running agent-tech workflows, you are managing multiple streams of generated code and architectural artifacts. You cannot easily manage that cognitive load in a linear terminal output. You absolutely need a visual, spatial canvas.
I come at it from a completely different way. The fundamental definition of a desktop agent, the entire reason a company builds a native desktop application instead of just telling its users to open a web browser, is mechanical integration with the local operating system.
Okay.
And this app fails that test. It has a glaring omission. The computer use feature is completely absent in this Linux preview. The AI cannot actually interact with your desktop applications.
Right, not natively.
It cannot open GIMP to edit an image. It cannot modify an OpenOffice document locally. Furthermore, it doesn't support app shots, and it doesn't support record and replay. For a Linux power user, this app is essentially a confusing, glorified browser wrapper.
That's a bit harsh.
But it offers no real mechanical advantage over the highly efficient Codex command line interface, the CLI, that developers already use perfectly well.
Let's dig into that mechanical gap immediately, because you are identifying the lack of the computer use feature, not just as a missing tool, but as a fatal flaw in the application's entire identity.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that it's a minor issue. Let me tell you why. When you migrate an artificial intelligence from a cloud-based web interface to a local desktop environment, the expectation, the core value proposition is agency. We aren't just looking for an oracle to answer coding questions anymore. We are looking for a digital worker that can execute cross-application automated tasks. Let's look at the mechanics of what is actually missing here. It lacks app shots.
Right.
And for our listeners, app shots isn't just the AI taking a static picture of your screen. It's a mechanism where the agent takes rapid, sequential screenshots to understand the dynamic visual state of your desktop in real time. It maps UI elements to coordinate grids so it knows exactly where a button is located or how a progress bar is moving.
Yeah, it creates spatial awareness.
Exactly. And because this is missing on Linux, the AI is effectively blind to your graphical workspace.
That is factually correct. Yes, the agent cannot see the local GUI right now.
And it also lacks record and replay, which is the system that allows the AI to record your manual mouse clicks and keyboard strokes across different applications, and then automate that exact workflow later.
Right.
If I am a sysadmin and I have this native app installed, I should be able to say, open my network monitoring tool, take a screenshot of the latency graph, and insert it into this local Markdown report.
Which it can do on Windows.
Exactly. In Windows and macOS, the AI is developing the capability to physically pilot the machine in this exact way. On Linux, this preview explicitly lacks that integration. Without the ability to manipulate the desktop organically, what exactly makes this a true desktop app? It is confined entirely to its own sandbox.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. Complaining about the lack of computer use right now is like focusing entirely on a missing hood ornament while ignoring the highly tuned engine underneath.
A hood ornament?
Yes, you are focusing on the 10% of edge-cased capabilities, having an AI click around in graphical applications, while completely ignoring the 90% reality of what a Linux software developer actually does all day.
Wait, you think interacting with local applications is an edge case for a local application?
The primary demographic of this specific tool, software developers and system engineers, yes, absolutely. GUI-based application manipulation is entirely secondary to code generation, architecture planning, and local file workflow management.
I don't know about that.
Look at what is fully operational and seamlessly integrated right now. You have full voice functionality, allowing you to verbally debug architecture. You have the built-in browser use, meaning the agent can independently research API documentation in the background while you focus on writing code.
Sure, he can browse.
You have full support for Chrome extensions, and most importantly, you have local and cloud workspace management directly tied into Codex. For 90% of a developer's daily needs, the experience on Linux is now functionally equivalent to the experience on Windows or Mac OS.
But equivalent is doing a massive amount of heavy lifting in that sentence.
How so? The voice functionality and the built-in browser are essentially web technologies ported into an electron-like wrapper. And for our listeners who have obsessed over system resources, you know exactly what I mean.
Oh, the memory argument.
Yes, the memory argument. An electron-like wrapper essentially bundles an entire web browser engine into a standalone application just to render a user interface. It eats up RAM that developers would much rather reserve for running local Docker containers or compiling code.
It's not that resource heavy.
It is when you compare it to a terminal process. The fact that I can talk to the agent is nice, but if a voice prompt involving the control of a local desktop application simply fails, the illusion of the agent is broken. It creates a massive cognitive friction point. The user has to maintain a mental checklist of what the AI is actually allowed to touch on their machine versus what it can't. Which is exactly why OpenAI explicitly labeled it a preview. We have to look at the underlying mechanics of Linux to understand why this feature is missing. Stabilizing computer use on Linux isn't just a simple UI tweak.
No, it's not.
It requires navigating the absolute chaos of the Linux display server ecosystem. Linux doesn't have a single unified display server like Windows or Mac does. You have X11, which is older and inherently allows applications to easily see what other applications are doing.
Which is terrible for security.
Right. Great for screen scraping, but terrible for security. But modern distributions are all migrating to Wayland, which is built on strict security isolation protocols. Under Wayland, one window cannot easily scrape the pixels of another window or inject automated keystrokes without explicit, complex permissions.
Exactly. That friction you just admitted to, the fact that the AI can't touch local apps because of the display server architecture, is exactly why this UI is a regression for the target audience.
A regression?
Yes, which leads us perfectly into the reality of how Linux users actually work. Why would a developer tolerate a memory-heavy, crippled visual app when the codex command line interface already gives them absolute deterministic control over their system?
So you are suggesting the CLI is superior for all tasks?
For a Linux power user, without question. If you are listening to this right now, and you live in Tmux, the terminal multiplexer that lets you manage multiple command line sessions in a single window, the idea of clicking a top menu in a graphical interface to switch between ChatGPT and Codex probably sounds like a nightmare.
I mean, it depends on the workflow.
The Codex CLI already exists. It handles repository inspection flawlessly. You point it at the local directory, and it parses your code perfectly. It executes shell commands natively. It integrates directly into CI/CD pipelines, meaning you can automate your continuous integration and deployment testing right from the terminal scripts you already wrote.
Yeah, it does that well.
So why on earth would you move your workflow into a graphical interface that, as industry analyst Frederick Lardenois from the New Stock pointed out, feels like ChatGPT work, and Codex are just awkwardly taped together?
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because you are fundamentally conflating execution with orchestration.
Okay, explain that.
The CLI is unparalleled for execution. Nobody's arguing that a developer should stop using the terminal to pipe commands or run a build script. But AI has fundamentally changed from being a simple autocomplete tool to being an autonomous agent.
And how exactly does a graphical interface solve that orchestration problem better than a well-configured terminal multiplexer?
Because of parallel multimodality. Managing parallel AI workflows in a linear terminal is like trying to monitor a busy airport's traffic by reading a single ticker tape of flight numbers.
It's not that bad if you know how to read it.
It is just a chaotic wall of scrolling text. Let's walk through a specific scenario. When you ask an agentic AI to scaffold a new authentication microservice, it isn't just writing one single Python file sequentially.
Right, it's doing several things.
It is generating a SQL database schema, writing 5 different API routes, generating a Docker file to containerize the service, and writing the unit tests all simultaneously. If you try to monitor that sprawling multi-threaded output in a terminal, you are completely overwhelmed.
I mean, maybe.
The new desktop app serves as the radar screen. It gives you spatial oversight. You need a graphical interface to monitor, approve, and review these sprawling projects side by side. You can inspect the database schema in one visual pane, have a high-level architectural conversation via voice in another, and review the code diffs visually in a third. The terminal is fundamentally unsuited for broad spatial reasoning and macro project oversight.
That's a compelling argument. But have you considered the actual user experience of this specific application in achieving that radar screen vision? Lardenois specifically noted that the early versions felt like distinct products awkwardly stitched together.
Well, it's a preview.
Even now, you are toggling between paradigms. For a casual user, or even a power user trying to build muscle memory, it is inherently confusing. It doesn't streamline the experience, it fragments it.
I don't think it fragments it.
When I am in the CLI, I have absolute deterministic control over what Codex is seeing, what context it is pulling, and what it is doing. When I am in this unified GUI UI, I am relying on a black box coordination layer that is still, by OpenAI's own admission, trying to figure out how to elegantly present agentic behavior.
Look, I will readily concede that the UI paradigm for agentic AI is not fully solved. We are in the very early days of visual AI orchestration, but that is an industry-wide challenge, not an OpenAI-specific failure.
But it is a failure if it actively disrupts the user's workflow today. You're asking developers to leave an environment of absolute precision, the command line, for an environment of abstract coordination that is still in its absolute infancy.
It's about building for the future.
And we haven't even touched on why this was released in such a disjointed state right now. Look at the date, August 11th, 2026. Why the specific date for a preview that lacks core computer use capabilities?
I assume you are going to point to competitive pressures, specifically Anthropic.
Absolutely. I look at this release timeline and I see a reactive, rushed deployment explicitly designed to counter Anthropic's Claude.
Really? Rushed?
Yes. Anthropic launched their Linux desktop app in beta just a month prior. And frankly, they did it with a much wider, more realistic net for the Linux community. They support Ubuntu versions going all the way back to 22.04.
Which is an older LTS release, sure.
OpenAI comes in, heavily restricts official Ubuntu support only to the newer 24.04 and 26.04 releases, strips out the local application control entirely, and slaps a preview label on it to excuse the missing features. They rushed this out the door simply to ensure Claude didn't become the default visual coordination layer on Linux.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. You are looking at the supported Ubuntu versions and seeing a restriction. I am looking at the architectural support and seeing a massive, calculated, strategic beachhead.
How is restricting versions a strategic beachhead?
Because OpenAI didn't just rush out a standard x64 port to match Anthropic's PR cycle. They delivered native ARM64 support from day one.
ARM64 is important, yes, but it doesn't excuse the lack of feature parity with the Windows and Mac versions.
It is absolutely crucial to understand why ARM64 matters here. Do you know how many modern developers are running ARM-based Linux servers or utilizing highly efficient ARM mini PCs for local edge AI development?
A growing number, certainly.
The industry is moving toward ARM because of power efficiency and the ability to run smaller, highly optimized open-source large language models directly on the silicon without cloud latency. By offering native .deb and .rpm packages specifically compiled for ARM64, OpenAI is capturing an incredibly influential, forward-looking demographic of the developer community. Right. This isn't a rushed reaction at all. Building native ARM binaries that tie deeply into local workflows, support Chrome extensions without crashing, and manage local cloud synchronization takes deep, deliberate engineering investment. They prioritized vast architectural reach over a fragile computer use feature that is incredibly difficult to stabilize across the fragmented Linux display servers we just talked about.
But let's talk about the consequences of that reach. When you give an AI agent native system access, even partially, through built-in browsers and Chrome extensions, you are opening a massive new attack surface on the machine.
Security is always a factor, yes.
Linux is not a walled garden like macOS. It's a highly fragmented, decentralized ecosystem. You have system administrators who now have to evaluate the severe security implications of developers running a closed-source AI agent with system-level read capabilities via these desktop packages.
It's sandboxed appropriately.
Is it? If this was just a CLI tool, the permissions are scoped tightly by the terminal execution environment. A graphical app acting as a visual coordination layer that dips into your local files, your browser extensions, and your voice inputs. That is a security nightmare waiting to happen, especially outside the officially supported distributions.
Which is exactly why OpenAI acted responsibly and limited official support to the most stable, widely used enterprise and developer distributions, Ubuntu, Debian, and Fedora. They are controlling the security perimeter.
But you and I both know Linux users don't neatly stay in those officially supported corporate boxes.
That's on them, though.
People are going to run this on Arch Linux, on OpenSUSE, on NixOS. They are going to use unofficial community ports to force it to run. The friction between a proprietary, closed-source GUI agent and the vast dependencies of user-customized Linux systems is going to create real vulnerabilities.
You cannot reasonably blame OpenAI for the inherent self-inflicted fragmentation of the open-source community. They provided a secure, validated path for the distributions that represent the vast majority of commercial and professional Linux usage.
I still think it's a risk.
They are being highly responsible by rolling this out as a preview, gathering telemetry and feedback, and deliberately holding back high-risk features like computer use until they can ensure it operates securely across those varying environments, especially across the X11 and Whelan divide.
I just find it highly ironic. We are sitting here celebrating the arrival of this major commercial application to Linux, but in order to do so, we have to excuse the fact that it doesn't fully work with the Linux desktop, that it is a massive memory drain compared to the existing command line, and that its user interface is a fragmented work in progress.
Well,
It feels very much like we are accepting a compromised product simply because we are grateful an AI giant finally remembered Linux exists.
I don't see it as a compromise at all. I see it as a foundational layer. Let's summarize our positions as we look at the broader implications of this release. I maintain that this application is a vital structural foundation for the future of visual agentic coordination on Linux. Yes, it is a preview. Yes, the UI paradigm for managing AI is evolving. But by bringing a native, unified client for ChatGPT, Work, and Codex to Linux with robust, future-proof ARM64 support, OpenAI has proven that the Linux developer workflow is now a strategic priority. This release fundamentally elevates the platform.
And my stance remains that this app is a fragmented preview that falls drastically short of its promise. By omitting the crucial computer use functionality, the mechanical ability to visually parse the screen via app shots, automate GUI tasks via record and replay, and interact with tools like GIMP or OpenOffice, it fails to justify its existence as a true desktop agent.
All right.
For the system admins and power users who actually drive the Linux ecosystem, the trusted, deterministic, highly efficient Codex CLI remains the vastly superior tool for execution, without the added cognitive confusion or the severe security concerns of a closed-source Electron-based wrapper.
I think where we do find absolute convergence is on the macro level of the industry. The desktop war is definitively the new frontier for these AI laboratories.
Oh, 100%.
We are seeing the battleground shift completely away from just comparing abstract model benchmarks like who has the highest MMLU score, which just tests massive multitask language understanding on standardized academic tests. Instead, we are seeing a fierce practical competition over direct mechanical integration into the user's daily workflow.
I agree completely. The days of just chatting with an AI in a browser tab are ending. Whether it is OpenAI rushing to match Anthropic or Anthropic trying to capture the Linux market first, the end goal is exactly the same: own the developer's screen and orchestrate their tasks.
Yes.
And we also firmly agree that designing an intuitive user interface for these complex agentic systems remains an entirely unsolved challenge. The software industry has not yet figured out how to visually represent an AI that is running long asynchronous tasks, coordinating local subtasks, and generating multiple distinct artifacts simultaneously without totally overwhelming the human user. It is a profound design challenge. Bridging the gap between cutting-edge autonomous artificial intelligence and the traditionally decentralized, terminal-heavy world of open-source software is going to require years of iteration. We highly suggest that you, our listeners, dive deeper into your own development workflows this week. Look critically at how you build software today. Exactly. Ask yourself whether a graphical AI coordinator monitoring your projects from a high-level radar screen or a hyper-precise command line executor running deterministic scripts within your terminal best suits your daily needs. Because ultimately, a tool is only as good as the efficiency it provides to the person wielding it.
We started this discussion talking about the ghost ship of the Linux desktop. The ship has finally sailed into the harbor, and it is undeniably carrying the most advanced AI technology on the planet. But as we look ahead, the real question isn't just what tools are in the cargo crates, it's how those proprietary tools will ultimately reshape the fiercely independent, open-source culture of Linux itself. We will leave that for you to decide.